What happens when you bring Sword Art Online Volume 2 to an Evangelion-dominated case tournament? Hello everyone, I'm Joseph Anderson. I'm your host for the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. And today, I just had to record an episode on something that I got up to just last night, which was an Evangelion case tournament, nearly 30 players. I think it was technically 28 or so players. And this case tournament drew many of the best players in the area to the Constellation Collective card shop. It was actually a pretty big card shop. I was really impressed by how big the space was in there. For one of the larger tournaments around, for the post Sword Art Online Volume 2 Evangelion format, and this was an incredibly fun event. Took me a bit of time to travel there. Took a bit of preparation. I didn't specifically prepare for this event, I wouldn't say. But one thing I will say is I did bring the Purple Progressive deck. And if you know from any of my content that I've been putting out, Purple Progressive is my favorite deck right now. Purple Progressive Sword Art Online Volume 2 deck. I just did a video, an episode on this deck, so you can see this episode. It's something of a companion piece to a very practical look into what playing this deck competitively looks like. And I did manage to top the event, getting third place overall, winning some fabulous prizes, including a booster box of Evangelion, mini packs, my 8th Asuna winner card of 2026. So I guess I'm going to hit my number 9 a lot faster than I thought. And even cooler, I pulled the SR Double Star Ray Ayanami from my box. Super lucky. It was a fantastic event. And what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to go through everything that happened at the tournament to really give you an inside look at where people's heads are at right now post Evangelion, and maybe give you some practical advice into playing Purple Progressive, as well as just what playing against a yellow Evangelion dominated tournament looks like. So while there were plenty of different kinds of decks, and you'll see when we get to the top 4 decks from the tournament, yellow Evangelion felt like it was everywhere. In fact, 4 out of the 5 rounds I played were against yellow Evangelion. So I guess it was really lucky that I was playing a deck like Purple Progressive that has no trouble dealing with yellow Evangelion. It can go just as fast as yellow Evangelion, and it has a way to shut Evangelion down from blocking attacks. So I guess that was a good pick for this tournament. However, I will highlight and emphasize the point that it's not like I just picked up a random deck and went to this tournament. I've been playing Purple Progressive for weeks, so I've already mastered the deck by now. In fact, I've been testing this deck so much, one of my friends at the tournament pointed out my sleeves were a bit dirty, and I changed them in the middle of the tournament because they were a bit dirty. So I've been playing this deck a ton. And that practice and expertise definitely aided me in this tournament. Despite the fact that this tournament was massively yellow Evangelion heavy, I don't know that I would read too much into that, other than people definitely seem willing to play yellow Eva, even though the zero cost Asuka got dropped from the set or cut from the set. I had originally thought that players would shy away from yellow Evangelion, despite it still being strong without the zero cost Asuka. And while that zero cost Asuka does drop it down a bit, it definitely, you can tell the difference not having that card makes when you play into yellow Evangelion. Players still seem willing to play it because of how aggressive and reliable it is. That being said, it is a high skill deck. It's a very high skill deck. So you definitely want to practice with it if you plan on playing it competitively, practice with it quite a bit. So with that being said, I really was more worried about Purple Gaius, and the trend, I still think Purple Gaius is going to be the massively more played deck. I think that this tournament, for whatever reason, there weren't very many Purple Gaius players, but even if you just look online, the highest SR from Evangelion is Purple Gaius, which is certainly currently sitting nearly at $20, putting it in range of many of the alts from the set. It is the highest non-alt card in Evangelion right now. So Purple Gaius is still the deck at large. It could be maybe a lot of these players wanted to play Evo for a perceived advantage into Purple Evangelion, right? That can happen sometimes. No one wanted to play the It deck, right? Who knows? But I definitely think that I wouldn't read too much into the fact that there was so much yellow Evangelion in this tournament. Because of this whole dynamic, I definitely have practiced a lot against Purple Evangelion, the Gaius Spears deck. I have not practiced a ton against yellow. I've only really played one match against it at a competitive level. So I really definitely had to learn on the go what to do. And so the first match was a bit of a learning curve, figuring out the right way to move around this deck. And what was very clear to me right away from playing was you really don't want to kill the 4-cost Ray. So the 4-cost Ray is just going to bring back a 2-cost Ray Ayanami with two or less required energy for your sideline set to active on the field. So this just perpetuates having a blocker that you get bonuses from when they're sideline, right? So the 0-cost Ray, when sideline, you get to draw a card. Whenever possible, you want to avoid getting rid of the Ray. Now, the thing is, most decks don't have a way to stop your opponent from blocking with the Ray. Purple Progressive does. There's lots of ways to stop the 4-cost Ray, or any card in this deck for that matter. There's lots of ways to prevent them from blocking and sidelining themselves. So not only did I avoid specialing the Ray, I also avoided letting them use Ray to block. I moved around it with smaller BP characters. This was present through several of my battles. Or I just shut down the block completely with the combo of the reducing the BP into the 3-cost Mito for my progressive deck. So if you watched the last episode or listened to the last episode, you should know how that works. If you haven't, go back and take a look at that to learn some of the fundamentals. But definitely going into this Ray, stopping it from blocking you, not sidelining it, is the way to go. Conversely, the card that I consistently found myself wanting to special is the 4-cost Mari. That card can just do so much. It can restand a character when attacking. Having it just passively on the field gives you benefits. So the 4-cost the 4-cost Mari is your prime special target. This first battle was a little bit of a battle of attrition that I stayed ahead in. When you get in situations where it's a battle of attrition, it really matters just to, especially if you're going into a deck that's not control, right? If you're playing against a deck that's not control, you kind of know that if you can keep the status quo and stay ahead in life, you're probably going to be good. So I just focused on that. I wasn't seeing my combos, so I just focused on staying ahead in life until I started getting my combos to close out the game. Essentially using my Mito to neg all of my opposing characters, or a combination of Mito and Kirito to neg all my opponent's opposing characters down to 2000 BP, and then just continually attacking through them with my Mito that cannot be blocked by 2000 BP characters or less. It's not that hard to do that. There's a lot of lower BP characters in Yellow Evangelion, which makes that a really powerful play. So that was the main thing I did. I think another fun play I did is I used the 1-cost Mito to neg the BP, rated a Mito over it, then further negged BP, right? So that was a really powerful way to just bring down the total threshold on my opponent's field very low. Now going to the second battle was into the only non-Yellow Eva deck of the night, and that was into a Green Lancelot deck piloted by one of the best Lancelot pilots around. Lancelot's fallen out of the meta a bit, so I've not really practiced against Lancelot, but I wasn't too concerned about it. It seems like a kind of deck that Purple Progressive would do really well into, and I was not wrong. I moved very quickly, taking as much as 4 life in 2 turns. My opponent did not hit any devastating triggers. A couple helpful triggers that if he had a board set up would have been really good, or if he'd had his energy line built up for the Lancelot, 6-class Lancelot, that would have been good. He did hit one of those out of life, but the game was essentially over in a couple turns. I did end up taking some life that I didn't necessarily need to, so I could accelerate the pace of closing out the game, and I closed it out with a combination of an Impact Asana and a 3-cost Argo. Going into the next round, again, into another Yellow Evangelion deck, my opponent did not hit double energy gen, which I think helped. So he was having to work around having a bunch of characters on the back line. I did make a misplay where I chose to discard a 0-cost that prevented me from pushing up and taking a life early. Luckily, that didn't end up losing me the game, but it definitely did slow me down a little bit. So pay attention to that in your own battles. Keep in mind the board state and what you're likely to do. Basically, I needed to have another 0 cost in hand to push up 2 attackers to get through a 3000 BP blocker. Didn't do that. It just set me back a little bit, but it didn't matter too much. Into this deck, again, I wasn't finding my Asanas. That doesn't usually happen. I wasn't finding my raid Asanas, and it was mostly my Mito that I was using to get through multiple attacks or get through attacks that couldn't be blocked. In the end, again, I did get the Asana just in time. Just like in the first game against Yellow Eva, I got the Asana just at the right time to close out the game via multiple attacks. But it was really more of a little bodies pushing and a combination of the Mito and the Kirito that helped me win that battle. Now, round 4 was the toughest battle of the night. I think the rest of the battles I was pretty much in charge of the whole way through. And actually, funny enough, round 4 into Yellow Evangelion, this was into the guy who ended up winning the entire tournament. You can read more about his perspective on the tournament via the blog. I'll put a link in this video, in the show notes, episode description, to the article on the blog, which has all of the deck lists, top 4 deck lists, from those who placed top 4, as well as an interview with Drewtabulous, who won the event. And this was the only round of the night that I lost, and I actually started super strong. I did have to do an AP draw on the second turn because I didn't have any cards to play. Never ideal to do that, but that was the only really setback. But then I got my combos up and running really quickly. But what ended up happening, and this is the main weakness of Purple Progressive, is just if you run up against a bunch of removal, it's very hard to come back for that for Purple Progressive, as Purple Progressive is a deck that relies on hitting combos with particular characters on the field. So what happened is I was definitely pulling off the combos. I had negged my opponent's board down, so I was essentially going to get a very hard to stop 4-hit turn in. I attacked with the Mito, attacked with the Asana, restood the Mito, and hit a special right then to shut down the second Mito attack. And then the next turn, I got hit with 2 specials out of the hand. So that was a 3 4,000 BP raid characters wiped off the board instantaneously, and then it was followed up by a 4 attacks that brought me down to 1 life. At that point, I pretty much knew I probably wasn't going to win, but I still tried my best, filled up my board so that I wasn't going to make it easy for my opponent. I took an attack with the raid Mito that I had, that I raided up. I took an attack with her because she can't be blocked by there was a 1,000 BP, that 0 cost raid that draws when it's sidelined. I didn't want him getting more resources, obviously. He didn't have very many cards in his hand. He had a field of small... One thing that was working in my favor, he had a field of small BP characters. All I had to do was hope that he didn't have any good cards in his hand and didn't draw any, and then I could still come back and win. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't open up my board to let that 1 life get taken. But it turns out he had the Asuka, played it, came inactive, sidelined one of my characters, and then swung in for game. So super intense fight, very, very strong turn. The only thing that, looking back, that I'm like, okay, because I played that battle very, very well. I think the only thing that maybe to keep in mind in that matchup for Purple Progressive is Yellow Evangelion does have a lot of removal, especially with that Asuka. So it might make sense to prioritize holding on to your pendant. I was in a very aggressive stance. I had a very aggressive mindset, and so there was a moment where I played the 1 cost Asana, lets you look at the top card of your deck and filter, or sideline it, or keep it on top of your deck. And I did choose to send it to the sideline because I didn't have a use for it then. I didn't have an Asana in hand to use it with. But it might have made sense to keep that in hand just for the situation that I faced. If I had kept 1 Asana alive and not had my whole front board wiped, it could have been a very different game. It may not have. I think in that moment I was getting rid of that. I had a really strong opening. I didn't have a need for that necklace. I wanted to see more cards, get to my other raids and combos faster. So that was the judgment call I made. But I think just in general, the necklace card, the pendant, is really strong. The pendant of Anarite is really strong into Yellow Evangelion. Now, again, another matchup into Yellow Evangelion. I was able to redeem myself after this loss, and I went into Yellow Evangelion that I essentially just used, again, same thing as all night, prevented my opponent from blocking, swung around them with Mito, and in the end took 2 life with an Argo after my opponent had walled up with 4,000 BP attackers. I just took 2 life with the Argo. The Argo can attack through anything with 4,000 BP or higher, basically cannot be blocked by those characters. So that in that situation, Argo worked perfectly. I did have to use a couple times a combo of the BP reduction with a 3-cost Mito character. When played, your opponent, that an opposing character that has less BP than its base can't block. I had to do that a couple of times to get multi-attacks off, but that was great into the Argo because the lower BP character couldn't then chump block the Argo. So pretty fun night. Lots of yellow Evangelion, which is crazy. But in the top 4, it was not overwhelmingly yellow Evangelion. In fact, there was 4 different decks in the top 4. So in first place by Drewtabulous, we have this yellow Evangelion deck, which is very strong and consistent and runs, which I think is smart, runs the 2 of the 2-cost Asukas. This is great for granting impact, but it also brings up the number of Asuka names in your deck considerably, making it easier to get your special off. And that worked great against me, right? Having I think it was that 2-cost Asuka on board that enabled him to play both those specials and take out my raid characters. I will also give Drewtabulous kudos for having a very blinged out deck. I don't know why I didn't notice that before, but he's got a lot of bling going in this deck. So good job, Drewtabulous. Second place was Red Kenshin by Lemon. This deck is pretty normal Red Kenshin deck. Running 6 of the... Is it 6 or is it 5? Let me see here. Oh, that's interesting. I think he's just running 5 of the 2 energy gen. So that's a little less than you usually see. Oh, no, it's 6 because he's got this. I forgot. He's got the Megumi. So that's actually more. So that Megumi, I've been seeing that a lot more in Red Kenshin decks. It's like a tech. So it's a 1-up. So there is 6 overall. It's probably a good number of 2 gen for Red Kenshin. But I think the really interesting thing is that this player, Lemon, is not running the 0-cost Kaoru at all, and is instead going for 4 of the 0-cost Yahiko, which brings up the active triggers in your deck by 4, but it also gives you an attacker that can't just easily be blocked early on. So that gives you a little more aggro at the expense of not having the draw 1, discard 1. So that's the deck that got second place at the 28-player case tournament. And in third place is yours truly with Purple Progressive. And you already know a lot about this if you saw the last video. So if not, I'll link to it in the episode description show notes, so you can go ahead and check that episode out and learn everything there is to know about this deck. It's the same build that I went over in that video. So go ahead and take a look, or that podcast episode. And then in fourth place is Sukuna. This Sukuna looks a lot like the deck that topped the regional in Florida. I mean, I don't have that deck open in front of me, but just at a glance, it looks a lot like it. I think the thing that stood out to me is that this deck is only running 2 of the 2-cost UGs. So that's interesting. So definitely keep that in mind if you're interested in building the blue Sukuna deck. And that's about it. That's about everything I wanted to talk about. You can go ahead and check out the article. I'll link to it in the episode description. Check out the article to the full play-by-play with even more insights into the case tournament, interview with the guy who took first at the tournament. But I think this was a really, really good way to experience Evangelion post SAO Evangelion coming out. This is the first really big tournament I've been to where I got to experience what this format is. And it definitely seems like a more varied format. There's definitely a lot of high level decks competing it out at a very even level. So I think that's fun. So if that helps you get an idea of what the competitive playing field might look like at your next event, check out the article on josephryderanderson.com. Like and subscribe on YouTube. And until next time, keep on battling.